Welcome, and bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us on Tech and Tequila. Today's episode is all about finding solutions during these chaotic times. I'm your host, Kat Lopez Shelby. So in case you haven't joined us before, first off, thank you for listening to us, for joining us today. We are the podcast where tech innovation meets life's boldest adventures. I'm your host, Kat Lopez Shelby, your go-to techie chica, trusted tech advisor, digital nomad, or I like to say local voyager, and yes, tequila enthusiast. Each week we dive into strategies, stories, and tech that helps entrepreneurs, creators, and curious minds thrive in this fast-paced, ever-changing world. And let me tell you, today's episode is a big one. So, I would say pull up. If you've got your drink, grab your drink, pour it over some ice. And this is a heart-to-heart because I myself am a small business owner. I work with small and medium-sized businesses. And let's just say things have been a wee bit chaotic lately. Just a little bit more chaos than let's say that we're used to. Now, anybody who's been around since 2020 knows that things can change, adjust, and you have to pivot and adapt. So what I want to cover today is, what do we do? How do we pivot? Is there a way that you can build a community? Can you think outside the box? And what do you do when your first plan doesn't work? So we're going to cover that all today. So grab a glass, take a breath. And before we get started, I wanted to talk about something that you can do that will help make your life a little easier, especially if you are doing some kind of networking event or you are entertaining. And that is diving into the wonderful world of ready-made cocktails. I'm sure that you've heard of them, but they have some examples of great ready-made cocktails. Things like On the Rocks, Philosophy, Muddle and Spear that you can pick up at Sprouts. So why would you want to grab a ready-made cocktail? Well, first off, you don't have to spend 20 minutes playing bartender, number one. And let's talk about, they have a consistent quality. So whether it's a margarita or an old-fashioned, brands like On the Rocks, Muddle and Spear, and Philosophy deliver bar quality flavor every single time. And some, like Philosophy, have only the good stuff in it. None of the bad or naughty stuff. They're amazing. I don't know if you've tried Philosophy before, but I highly recommend it. We had it on an episode before. The other thing is it saves you time. There's no more measuring, muddling, mixing. You just open and pour and enjoy. It's perfect for busy entrepreneurs, people that are traveling, and of course, techies on the move. These cocktails are portable, so they are designed to travel with you. So whether you're at the beach, a tailgate, or recording your next big podcast episode, their great cocktail is just a twist away. So, and of course, let's be very clear. You don't have to worry about getting some lackluster, not great, super cheap, horrible quality alcohol in your ears, because unlike cheap mixers of the past, these brands use real high quality spirits, no fake flavors. They don't cut corners. As an example, On the Rocks has Tres Generations in one of theirs, Hornitos in another, and Ethan Vodka, just to name a few. And of course, these are perfect for hosting. Like I said, so if you're having a busy day, you're hosting an event, you can grab one of these. And you will find On the Rocks, of course, Philosophy you can only at this time find online. They have spread out into a couple of retail locations in California and some other places. They haven't made it to Texas yet. Keep your fingers crossed. Soon. But you can find On the Rocks at Specs, at Twin Liquors, and several other different places. So first off, let's all get ready for this great discussion. Pour a glass, have some great instant vibes, and of course, cheers to keeping it simple. Let's see if I can open this one right here, because I picked up the tequila martini from On the Rocks. And let's see if we can get this bad boy and get ready to have this discussion for today. So let us see. We will see. But here it is. So salute. Love it. Love it. Didn't even have to worry about trying to make the perfect espresso for it. So great. So What I wanted to cover in today's episode is let's take a moment to acknowledge what is going on, right? So let's take a minute, let's take a second. Business today has been crazy. So anyone who has been around since 2020 knows that it's not just about having a great idea. It is about resilience. We currently see where interest rates are up, budgets are tighter, talent is shifting, and of course, tech is moving faster than we can blink. We all know that. And the reality is, this level of chaos that we're experiencing currently, it can be exhausting. But I don't ever want people to forget, but it's also where opportunity lives. It's where we can find solutions. So if you're feeling like you're rebuilding your business, your brand, or even yourself, just know that you are not out there alone. It is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of the times, and it's a sign that you're still in the game. My last week's guest, Jim McNeese, made a statement about if he could tell any entrepreneur something, it would be just keep going, keep trying, keep working hard, keep, I said, chugging away like Thomas the Train. So how do we stay in the game without burning out? So let's get into that. So when things feel unstable, the first thing that I tell my clients is go back to your resources and go back to your toolbox. What's in your toolbox? What are things you can control, or what are things you have power over? And I don't just mean financial ones. I mean, it's great to have 6, 7, 8, a year's worth of every single bill taken care of. But what are the other things? And so when we're going through these chaotic times right now, think about the resources that you have. Obviously right now we still have the SBA resources, especially in particular locations. Like if you're in a major city like Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, reach out to your small business administration, because they have free classes, they have mentorships, they have grants that you can only be a part of if you take part in different things that they have. And even if you have tried before, there's nothing about trying again. We have a new administration, we have a whole new thing. But let's say you tried the SBA, whatever you're doing is not covered. Think about the other resources you have, like, for example, Lift Fund. Have you looked into that? What type of local business centers? Like, I know in West Texas, they have BAM Entrepreneurial that you can work. And what they do is they offer low cost and sometimes free strategy, things to help to get funding, things to help make sure you have the right tech, things of that. That also leads to another thing. And let's talk about, you've got your chambers of commerce. So whether that's your local chamber of commerce, your Hispanic chamber of commerce, which is super important, your African American chamber of commerce, reach out to those, look at what resources they offer, because I guarantee there are resources available that you do not know about. The other thing is, if you are in a situation where you're looking to get some additional capital, we hear about it all the time, but as somebody who's gotten a grant before, is look into grants, look into microloans. Instead of going the traditional route, look at different programs that they may have. There's programs like Kiva and some private programs and Hello Alice, and I'm going to say Lift Fund again. And, let's say you talk to a particular group, whether that's the, Black Chambers of Commerce or the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and they might be able to lead you in a different direction, as well as, maybe there's a credit union that you can work with. Maybe you can look at a working capital. Maybe you can work at something of that nature. And another one, of course, is what type of online communities are you a part of? So, you have platforms like Alignable, LinkedIn, and I talked about this in a previous podcast, I'm a member of the Entrepreneurista Network. I'm a member of the Society. I'm a member of the Biz Club, Women in Tech. Latinas in tech. Like, what type of communities are you a part of? Do they have additional free resources? You never know. I'm telling you right now, I look at the Entrepreneurista Network, and there is literally not a week that goes by that they don't put up, like, this person needs a podcast host or podcast guest, and this person, these grants are available. So just, look everywhere you can. If you're sitting here thinking like that sounds like a lot of work, just remember, you would be surprised at places where you can get some of these free resources. And I use this as an example. If you're in the Austin area, one of those resources, if you have a library card or you're part of some of the alumni associations, you can actually get free lead generation, like list of people to call, list of things to look, just from your local library. So now we know what's in our toolbox. What if the toolbox itself needs to be remodeled? What if you're like, I'm a part of these organizations, but I haven't done anything with them in forever and ever. So sometimes what you need isn't necessarily more hustle. It isn't necessarily like a full pivot. Sometimes you need a little bit of a better strategy. And sometimes you do need a pivot, let's be honest. So let's talk about some signs that maybe you need a pivot. Maybe you need to look at your toolbox and you need to think, this isn't working, so we've got to go to point B. So your sales have plateaued despite your best marketing effort. Your audience needs have changed. You're doing 10 times the work for 1/10 of the payoff. This always makes me think of that commercial where it talks about you get more business, and then you realize that this more business doesn't always equate to more sales. You feel constant resistance or frustration. So let's talk about when you have these experiences, what do you think you need to do? So first off, let's not be like, burn it all down, because I highly wouldn't recommend that unless you are like, let's do it. We're going to do a full rebrand. Instead, let's refocus. So maybe your service is fine, but the way you're framing it needs a little bit of a glow up. You need to reword something. You need to make it more suitable offering for today's market. Like, go from talking about here's this and it helps with, let's say your customer experience, to, change it and like own it. Be like, during these chaotic times, do you know what you're spending on your tech? During, do you know what's going on, or whatever it may be? You have to pick what your thing is. There's always finding a new market, which I think is brilliant, because we've all seen that with Stanley and Yeti and how they found a new market. So maybe your current audience is a little tapped out. Is there another audience that you can sell to that you just haven't really had contact with, touch base with? And this is going to go a little bit back to community, because, if you haven't been getting out there and doing networking meetups in real life, like let's say you're not going to your Chamber of Commerce event, or you see somebody is having a grand opening or a 1-year anniversary, are you attending these? Because you're going to meet new people, and that's going to open up and maybe give you a new idea. You never know. I mean, you really literally never know. So, and of course, let's repackage. Let's not completely reinvent the wheel. We don't need to burn it down. Instead of launching something new, maybe it just needs to be honed into, bundle different services and that you already do in a way that feels fresh and new, and, I'll give you an example of something that we did. So probably within the last 6 months to a year, we noticed that we were having lots of people that were looking at in the SMB space that said, hey, I really just need some help with figuring out what I need to do for being a digital nomad for this. And at the time they were like, but some of the things they're not applicable to me, because they're for a bigger company. They're for someone that has 10 to 15 to 20. So what we did is we sat down, we came up with a package that covers like you're a solo entrepreneur. We came up with a package that covers a smaller team that just happens to all be remote. And what we did is we focused on that being part of our digital nomad tech stack, basically. And what we did is we also focused on packaging this for hashtag your digital bliss. Like, here's a technology review that's just for digital nomads. And also we, joined forces with Dr. Jenna W. Clack. And we said, here's the mindset. Here's the way to plan for this. Here's what you need to do. So in essence, it was the same skills, the same things that we've been talking about, but we looked at it from a new angle and we just kind of adjusted it to better fit what we were seeing come in. So I know I talked about this a little bit before, but this also leads to what about your community? And we've seen a huge shift in, well, at least with us, we've seen a huge shift to more and more people being remote, So at this point in time, like, are you building a community or are you rebuilding a community? Or are you part of a community? So in tough times, community isn't optional. It's really your secret weapon. And whether that is like the many, many things that I'm a part of, it's sometimes you need to make sure that your community knows like who you are and your why. If a door has closed, open another door. The other thing is, I highly recommend kind of what we talked about. We collaborated with someone, we cross promote, we send out information about BAM. And, we're working with the organizers of the National Petroleum Day. Like there's ways that you can work to build out this additional community. So if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, there's one more thing for me to do. So you're like, where do I find them? What I always said is reach out with intentionality. What does that mean? Instead of random scrolling, reach out to someone that you're like, either they're someone that I can collaborate with, they're somebody that I feel like we have customers in common that maybe we can cross promote, be very intentional. And I would say start with a tiny collab, like a co-branded post, a pop-up Zoom call, or, a guest spot on your podcast. Those are all great things. If you have a podcast, I highly recommend. The other thing is, if you have a well-developed community, I'm going to tell you a secret. You cannot be afraid to ask for help. And a lot of people, for some reason, won't talk to their community and they avoid at all costs, like saying, hey, this is where I'm at. And I need a little push. Or how would you feel about posting this? Or how would you feel? This is the one that I think a lot of people avoid most. And it's one of the most powerful because honestly, people want to help you. You have to ask. It can be something as simple as I work with customers. And one of the things I always ask my clients is, oh, do you have any open positions? Because a lot of times my clients are looking to fill a position within their organization and they're just not getting traction. And, maybe the staffing agency isn't going well. I'm like, hey, well, I don't mind posting it across all the places that I have community. So whether that's LinkedIn, Instagram, just everywhere, And of course, let's be very transparent. If you're isolating yourself, isolation will lie to you. It'll tell you no one gets it. Nobody cares. You're better off figuring it out alone. But the truth is, we are not meant as entrepreneurs to walk this walk all by ourselves. We're meant to do this in a community, and whatever that community may be. So, let's be very honest. Sometimes some of the people closest to you, your family, maybe your friends don't get it, but maybe somebody that you partner with, maybe a supplier might have something that will open up a thought process that you didn't think about before. So we've given you some resources. We've told you about ways to pivot, and now you're building a community. So let's talk about thinking outside the box, right? Nobody wants to be that square peg trying to be shoved into a round a round hole, right? You want to be able to think like, what can I do? So if you want to stand out right now, you can't just do business as usual. You've got to be brave enough to do things a little differently. And maybe that is starting a podcast. Maybe that's being willing to be live on Instagram. Maybe that's willing to have a segment on a TV show. Or, I mean, the big thing I would talk about is doing lives, doing something that you're uncomfortable with, right? So I have this very simple philosophy, and that is that everything is a skill set. And I can tell you, if you listen to podcast 1, it's going to sound very differently than podcast 50 or podcast 300, right? So you want to build those skill sets. So, but here are 3 ways to start. 1, offer something totally unexpected. Package something quirky. Offer a chaos-proof service, like run a pop-up, do a flash sale, give people an experience, not just a product. Or, hey, if you have never worked with, let's say, your Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, or you have never worked with, your local entrepreneurial organization, and you're like, hey, I really would like to do something different, sit down and talk to them, come up with something. I can't tell you the number of times that I've made the decision to go to an event or be a part of something because it was very out of the norm. It was something very different. And the other thing is, and I can't say this enough, if you have not built your own personal brand, you need to make sure that you start today, because people don't always trust, let's say, a big corporation, but what they do trust is you. They trust your face, your energy, your time. All of that matters. So during these times, make sure that you are showing up for yourself in ways that you haven't before. I talked about it a minute ago. Do some lives, do some things that are unexpected, be a podcast guest, I forgot another community I'm a part of. Become part of a podcast community, become part of Latinas in Podcasting. Or let's say you have a podcast, then, hey, submit your podcast to Apple once a month, or do something different, like go to Toastmasters. And then, of course, run tiny little experiments. So, and I always say, like, an experiment can be everything from post something in a totally different manner with totally different colors, do a video every single day, do something, give yourself like a 3-day challenge or a week challenge to see, is this breaking through? Am I getting, more views? And, when all else fails, you got to eat the frog, right? None of us really want to eat the frog. And sometimes eating the frog is setting yourself up with, your Pomodoro time clock and being like, all right, I'm going to send out 15 emails first thing in the morning. And then I'm going to cold call all these different companies. And then I'm going to call and check in with my existing customers, because I know for myself as a trusted technology advisor, there's nothing that makes my brain like hurt more when I have repeatedly told someone that I do this, and this, and they'll go, I didn't know you did that. So these are just things to pique people's interest, because you have to stay in front of them and keep working towards it. So I would be not being fully truthful if I didn't say, remember, creativity loves constraints. So when the world says no, you get to say, watch me, like, keep going. I'm going to go back to what Jim said. Sometimes being an entrepreneur, sometimes being in sales, sometimes doing something means that you have to keep going. That means that you have your Thomas the Train and you just keep trying something different. I think you have to, I always say, give it the 24 hours. If you think you're going to make a big change and you're like stuck and you can't make your mind up, sleep on it. Or lots of people in marketing will talk about A and being it, try on, let's say, if you have a LinkedIn profile and you have an Instagram and you have a Facebook, try one set of, marketing campaign on LinkedIn and try another set on Instagram. But the point is, you keep showing up every day. You show people you have the grit. You show people you're still here, and you talk about everything you do, and you learn a whole new skill set, right? So you are ready So I hope that this episode gave you some things to think about, because I really wanted to come during this episode and talk about solutions, because I have talked to many clients. I've talked to obviously other entrepreneurs, people that work in my space, and things feel very tight and very frustrating. And, it can be crazy. But if you're feeling the chaos right now, number one, know you're not alone, first off. And number two, know you're not broken. Keep in mind, we're all being built for something bigger. So let me tell you, as a reminder, use your resources, lean into your community, be bold enough to pivot, and be even bolder to bet on yourself. So I think I'm going to leave you with that today. If you love this episode, obviously make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening and leave a quick review. We love to look at it. We always come with either people who work in tech, mindset, everything about business. And, it helps us to provide incredible content for listeners like yourself. And of course, if you want more tips, tools, and tequila vibes, come hang out with me on Instagram at Shelby Tech Solutions, on Facebook at Shelby Technology Solutions, and of course, you can find me on LinkedIn as Kat Lopez Shelby. But until next time, keep your tech smart, your business bold, and your glass full. This is Tech and Tequila, where we build the future with a splash of adventure. Salud.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Tech and Tequila. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. To stay updated about all things tech and more, don't forget to visit us at our website, shelbyts.com. If you loved what you heard, remember to show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast. Your 5-star ratings and reviews mean the world to us and help us to reach more listeners just like you. So muchas gracias again for joining us with Tech and Tequila. Thank you so much. You learned a lot about tech, and maybe you had a nice drink of tequila.